Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most emotional, complicated, and fascinating chapters in the life of Prince Harry, a story that begins with a quiet reunion behind palace doors, and ends with a heartfelt tribute that left the world thinking about Princess Diana all over again. Before we get into it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, because trust me, you won't want to miss the stories we have coming. Imagine this: London, a crisp September morning. Cameras clicking in the distance. A black car pulls away from Clarence House. Inside, Prince Harry. The reunion that royal watchers had been waiting nearly 20 months for had finally happened. But what really went on behind those closed doors? And why does it matter so much, not just for the monarchy, but for the man who has spent years carving out his own path away from it? Harry's return to the UK wasn't just another royal engagement. It was loaded with tension, emotion, and symbolism. Just hours before the meeting with his father, King Charles, Harry had been speaking about resilience and hope. But there he was, sitting down for afternoon tea with a man at the center of his life's greatest struggle, and perhaps his greatest source of longing. The meeting was short, less than an hour, in fact. The king, a man known for keeping to his strict routines, had taken his usual 5 p.m. tea, sandwiches, cakes, and his beloved Darjeeling with honey and milk. Harry arrived just after 5:20, ducked quickly inside Clarence House, and emerged before 6:15, ducking his head again as photographers tried to catch his expression. Whatever was said in those 55 minutes was private, but the fact that it happened at all was monumental. It was the first face-to-face encounter between father and son since February of the previous year, when Harry had flown across the Atlantic in a rush to see Charles after his cancer diagnosis. That meeting had lasted just over half an hour. This one wasn't much longer, but this time, Harry seemed lighter, more at ease. Within the hour, he was already at London's Gherkin building, smiling and laughing as he hosted an Invictus Games event. But let's rewind for a moment, because this trip wasn't just about reconciliation. It was also about remembrance. The following morning, Harry walked to the doors of the Diana Award office in central London. This was no formal royal appearance. There were no guards of honor, no trumpets, no stiff ceremonial protocol. Instead, there were 40 young people, innovators, campaigners, and activists waiting for him. The energy was electric, a mixture of nerves and pride. Harry didn't just sit quietly and nod through the event. He engaged. He listened. He smiled at stories of struggle and survival, leaned forward when someone spoke about cyberbullying, and nodded solemnly when the conversation turned to mental health. This wasn't just an appearance for him. This was personal. For roughly an hour, he took part in a panel discussion, sitting alongside names like Lottie Leach, Elsa Arnold, and Ida Rennie and Hope Akpan, all young people who had turned their own pain into purpose. The panel was moderated by Dan Laws, a former recipient of the Legacy Award, who has long been involved in social action inspired by Princess Diana's memory. When Harry finally spoke, the room fell silent. Getting involved in peaceful social action takes courage and determination, he told them. Young people see the issues society faces close up, whether that's poor mental health or the consequences of inequalities. His words carried a quiet intensity, as though he was speaking not just to them, but to himself. Then came a moment that felt almost cinematic. He said, "You don't stand still. Your empathy and compassion drive you to make change. Purpose combined with action can help overcome a sense of hopelessness. And that's exactly what you've shown today." There it was, the heart of the matter. Hope, that elusive, fragile thing that has driven Harry since the day he walked behind his mother's coffin at just 12 years old. He was reminding them, and maybe reminding himself, that taking action gives meaning, even when life feels unbearable. My mother believed in the power and agency of young people to positively impact the world, he continued. The Diana Award continues her legacy by putting young people at the heart of everything they do. For a moment, it was as though Diana herself was in the room. The charity named after her has become one of the few remaining bridges between Harry and his old life, one of the rare causes that both he and Prince William still support. Yet, tellingly, the brothers did not cross paths during this visit. William was hundreds of miles away in Cardiff that day, visiting a new mental health center. The two princes, once inseparable, are now carefully orbiting each other, close enough to be mentioned in the same breath, but far enough to avoid collision. Harry's speech wasn't scripted. At one point, he looked directly at the young panelists and said, "Thank you all for being here. I don't know how you were 5 or 10 years ago, but to see you sitting here now with the confidence you have is proof that this works." It was raw, unpolished, honest. He spoke about the invisible weight so many young people carry, the anxiety, the isolation, the constant test of emotional resilience. "If you're a young person," he said softly, "it can sometimes feel as though you're lost and separated from a group and you feel isolated. But I can assure you that there's nothing wrong with you." These weren't just words for the room. They were words for a generation. Perhaps even words Harry wishes someone had said to him decades ago. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Just after 11:18 a.m., Harry slipped out of the building and into a waiting car. But the image of him standing there, speaking about purpose and pain, lingered. This wasn't the prince who once wore the crown's weight on his shoulders. This was a man who had stepped away from that world and was now defining his own. But here's the thing. No matter how far he travels, Harry can never truly escape the gravitational pull of the monarchy. The shadow of his family looms large, and the fact that he chose this moment, this visit, to see his father again speaks volumes. Was this just a polite stop on the way to an engagement? Or was it a signal, a small but significant olive branch, in what could be the slow rebuilding of trust between father and son? And then there's William. The brothers remain estranged, and their distance was noticeable. Was it deliberate? Was it strategic? Or was it simply too soon for them to be in the same room? Together? The hours after Harry's morning event were just as significant as the moments that came before. As the city's evening lights began to glow, Harry stepped into a very different atmosphere. The Gherkin, one of London's most striking skyscrapers. Inside, guests gathered for a special Invictus Games reception, waiting for the man who had built this global movement from scratch to walk into the room. If the reunion with his father had been a private moment, this was the opposite. Here, Harry was back in his element. Confident, charismatic, smiling. Cameras captured him laughing with attendees, shaking hands, and delivering a speech that felt more like a rallying cry than a formal address. It was a striking contrast to the quiet, reflective tone of the morning. And yet, even here in the middle of the celebration of resilience, there was an undeniable sense of transition. Harry was closing a chapter, or perhaps opening a new one. After all, this trip had been full of firsts. His first reunion with the king in nearly 2 years, his first chance to publicly connect with young people in the UK since his explosive memoir Spare came out, and his first major appearance back in London without Meghan by his side in quite some time. Observers noted how relaxed he seemed, as though the weight of anticipation had finally lifted. Just hours earlier, he had been inside Clarence House, a place that holds so many memories of his childhood. There is something deeply symbolic about sharing tea with his father there, the very ritual that King Charles reportedly never skips, even on the busiest of days. Perhaps that hour of tea and quiet conversation was more than just a courtesy call. Perhaps it was a first step toward something bigger. But if reconciliation was in the air, there was also a sense of unfinished business. Rumors had swirled for days that the king and Harry would meet, and when confirmation finally came, royal watchers speculated endlessly about what might be said. Was there an apology? A promise to communicate more? Or was it simply two men, a father and son, sitting down to bridge the gap of silence that had stretched between them? What we do know is that Harry left looking upbeat, even hopeful. And that hope might just be what keeps this story alive. Because make no mistake, this wasn't just a personal reunion. It was a moment that carried implications for the monarchy itself. Consider the timing. Charles had just returned from Balmoral, where he traditionally spent the summer months, a place that, for Harry, carries painful memories of the night he was told his mother had died. Harry, meanwhile, had been in London attending a series of events tied to causes that mean the most to him, causes rooted in the very legacy of the woman whose absence shaped him. It's impossible to ignore the poetry of that timing. The boy who once walked behind Diana's coffin was now, decades later, standing before a new generation and urging them not to stay silent. The man who had spent years publicly criticizing his family was now quietly sitting down with his father for tea. It was as if the past and present had collided over those 2 days, leaving behind a complicated but strangely hopeful picture. And yet, one piece of the puzzle was still missing: William. The Prince of Wales remained far away, focused on his own work in Wales, marking World Suicide Prevention Day at a mental health center in Cardiff. For many, this physical and emotional distance was a reminder of just how deep the rift between the brothers still runs. This is where the story becomes almost Shakespearean. Two brothers, once inseparable, now divided by years of tension, public accusations, and private pain. Their paths keep crossing, just not in person. And each time, the question grows louder: when will they finally face each other? Harry's trip came just days before his 41st birthday, a milestone that might have made him reflect even more deeply on what matters most. After all, birthdays are often a time of reckoning, a reminder that time is moving, that opportunities to repair relationships are not endless. And then there is the looming shadow of the monarchy's future. King Charles is not getting younger, and every public appearance, every family moment, carries the weight of what is to come. Will Harry find his place again, even in some small, informal way, within the royal circle? Or has he built a new life so far removed that there's no going back? These questions are what make this story so compelling, because it's not just about a prince and a king. It's about fathers and sons. It's about grief and forgiveness. It's about the universal struggle to reconcile where we came from with who we have become. As Harry left London, his representative summed up the trip simply: he's obviously loved being back in the UK, catching up with old friends, colleagues, and just generally being able to support the incredible work of the causes that mean so much to him. And just like that, he was gone, flying back to California, back to Meghan, back to the life he has built. But the images of this visit, the clasped hands of young activists, the quiet drive into Clarence House, the wide grin at the Invictus reception, linger like snapshots in a photo album we're not quite done looking at. There's a reason this story captured so much attention. It isn't just royal gossip. It's a window into something we all understand: the desire to belong, the courage to speak up, and the hope that even the most fractured relationships can find a way forward. So where does this leave us? Maybe at the start of something, maybe at the end, or maybe right in the middle of a story that is still being written. What's clear is that Harry's journey, from the boy in the black suit behind his mother's coffin to the man speaking to young people about purpose and action, is far from over. And that is why we watch. Because every time Harry steps back onto British soil, there's a chance, just a chance, that the story might change, that a family might heal, that history might take a different turn. So, what do you think really happened during that hour behind closed doors at Clarence House? Was it the start of reconciliation, or just a polite gesture? And what about William? How long before we see the two brothers in the same room again? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's talk about it. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Harry's visit, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves royal stories, and of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Because in this story, there's always a next chapter.